person exists who would say, now that I don't believe in God, I'll stop giving money to charity. I don't care anymore. I don't think there is such a person. And if that were so, it would be a very strange religion that they'd been professing.
Who will organize good works in the absence of religion?
But why is it that in survey after survey, religious people do give more, and religious people watch less television and use drugs less and use alcohol less?
This is what religion is down to.
It has social utility.
It's very impressive to me.
Okay, good.
It's very often the first thing. When we debate with Catholics, they always change the subject to charity right away. With Jews, it's usually a little later.
You just said that they...
And with Muslims... And with Muslims, it's
at the very
all the time. Because what else can they don't want to defend their faith.
But you just said the opposite. You just said that if you didn't believe, you wouldn't do it.
They don't want to defend their faith. They don't want to say, they feel uneasy talking about redemption, salvation, all this kind of thing. But look at the good work we've done. If you talk to the Mormons, they'll say, you may not think much of Joseph Smith. And I say, you got that right. But, boy, you should see our missionaries in Peru.
The government will do the work if religion does not.
Excuse me,
government?
What has this got to do with the existence of God or the validity of religious claims? It has nothing to do with it,
social
which
utility.
is why it's always introduced as a time-wasting tactic.
Wait. No, don't applaud that.
Nothing to do with it.
He just...
It used to be believed, I mean, the number of gods now it's infinite, and a new god is created almost every day by some cult or other, but it used to be that there was a belief that gods were in the trees, in the woods, in the springs, in the sea, in the clouds, and so forth. Polytheism of a kind. Then something a bit more polytheistic, like Olympus, where there was at least a location for the divine, but it was multifaceted. And then monotheism, getting it down to one. So I regard this as progress of a sort, because they're getting nearer the true figure all the time.
I actually...
Rabbi, yes. Progress. Maybe.
Which is why, which by the way is why the Vatican, in its old days, was very upset by the concept of zero. Didn't like zero at all, the most important number of all, the number without which you can't do anything. Mm-hmm. Which wasn't there in Roman numerals.
No, it was invented in Islamic civilization,
and unfortunately
actually.
also struck them as a sinister import from in partibus infidelium, from pagan lands, but also the concept of zero was very troubling for theism, and must be, and does indeed remain so. It's one of the many, many ways in which theism is not compatible with the scientific worldview. Again, piling on completely unnecessary assumptions. It's also inviting a question that will make you uncomfortable.
Go ahead.
If you say that no, it's because God has given you free will, I have to ask you, how do you know that?
Well, are you assuming that we have free will? Are you assuming that we have free will?
If you answer,
then give me another source.
If you answer my question with another question,
give me another
I'll still
source.
answer it.
Okay.
I will still answer it, even though your question is an answer to mine. Rather, not an answer, a response to mine.
Yeah.
The view I take about free will is that, of course, we have free will because we have no choice but to have it. I was, and to some extent, and I still, to some extent, am a dialectical materialist, and I also think there are some ironies in the universe as well as in history. But to say, of course we have free will, the boss says we've got it, is to make a mockery of the whole concept. And it's also to invite the question, what kind of tyranny is this that you want? You want an all-supervising, all-deciding person. I ask you first, what sources of information do you have about this person's existence that I don't have, that are denied to me? I'd like to know. And second, why do you want it? Why do you want to arrive at a terminus of unfreedom where there is a celestial authority upon whom all things depend and from which all things flow? Why do you want that, and how on earth do you know that there's any case to be made for its existence?
Yes, please. That's a good question.
I don't think that's a terminus of unfreedom.
I think you're only free when you've declared against it, frankly. That's the beginning of freedom, is the emancipation from the tyranny of theocracy, yes.
Islam makes very large claims for itself. Very large claims indeed. It claims to be the last and final religion, the last and final revelation. When you see bumper stickers, everyone says you can't reduce major things to a bumper sticker. It's not my idea to have bumper stickers saying Islam is the solution. It's a well-known slogan, actually, of parties associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. They say Islam is the solution for everything. It takes care of all your life and the one to come. Sexuality, political economy, banking, diet, relations with other religions, everything. It's a total solution. What is creepy about the word total? I hope I don't have to tell an audience like this. It's the first 5 letters of the word totalitarian. It's absolute. It's absolute. It's all-inclusive. It's unanswerable. And oddly, for a religion that makes such large claims, notice another thing about Islam, it doesn't particularly like having these claims questioned or scrutinized. In other words, just as there is with all religions an inverse relationship between the claims they make and the evidence they can produce for them, you must have noticed that, with Islam, a younger religion, and perhaps therefore more in its first flush, there's an extraordinarily strong willingness to say that any challenge to its absolutist claims is by definition profane. And profanity and blasphemy can be the antecedent to very severe punishment, and often are, for Muslims and for non-Muslims. And this is not a road of peace, in my submission.
Well, first,
one day,
you're right that science has made many things more comprehensible to us, and it's explained things that religion used to take credit for. In other words, now we know there's a germ theory of disease. Diseases are not curses or revenges from heaven. Same with earthquakes and so on. The stuff they used to teach us, and many of them still do, is nonsense. Evil nonsense as well as ignorant nonsense. But it's also taught us, just in my lifetime, an enormous amount more about how little we know. We're much, much more ignorant than people who lived before Galileo. Because we have now an increasingly large idea of the fantastic expanse of the unknown. That's precisely the moment at which to say that skepticism is what's necessary, inquiry, debate, doubt. Where's faith in this? Where's the usefulness of faith there? There's no use to it at all. Socrates, who, as far as I know, existed but may well not have done, it doesn't matter to me. No one will insult me if they say, Socrates, your great hero, didn't exist. Try it on a Muslim, try it on a Christian, their prophets didn't exist. Or tell people that Moses is a myth. They start hurling themselves about, making menacing noises very often. Socrates said, you're only educated when you've understood how ignorant you are. And you're only going to even find that out by doubting everything all the time. There's all the difference in the world between that outlook and that mentality, and the mentality of faith. And second, on metaphysics, which I noticed, take refuge in several times already this evening, like what is love? Is something poetic or is it prosaic? Very good questions, but metaphysical ones. Those who say God exists and intervenes in the world, in other words, those who say there is a religious God, the God of religion, are saying that redemption is on offer to human beings, that salvation is on offer to them, and that if they reject the offer, they can be in really big trouble. Now, don't start talking to an audience like this, or, if you don't mind, to a debate partner like me, as if religion was a private matter, because everybody knows that if it was, there wouldn't be anything to argue about. It's precisely because it claims to be a total solution, a complete solution to all problems, available on pain of death, sometimes, in some forms, but available to you if you'll only have enough faith. Where we've just found out that faith is probably the most overrated of the virtues and the one least useful to us in the real dilemmas that we actually have to face. I say in my book, available at fine bookstores everywhere, that as long as I don't have to hear about it, I don't mind what people believe. If they say, well, thanks to Joseph Smith and his gold plates, I have real faith now, and I've got a family, and I have friends, and I have a real system, and so on, I say, fine, fine. Just don't come to my front door with it. Don't ask for a tax break for it. Don't ask my children to be taught it in the schools.
Did you sign up tonight thinking you wouldn't hear about it?
And I asked the question in the book. People think they have a personal relationship with the Creator, and they're the possessors of a wonderful secret. It must feel, I've never felt it, but I presume it feels great. Why doesn't it make them happy? They're not happy. They can't be happy until everyone else believes it too. They go out and proselytize, very often, and here's, I can't let your last answer go, very often in the guise of charity. You notice how often that religion, rather than answer the questions that I've put, like, how do you know there's a God? What evidence do you have for it? Which you say, well, lots of good people do good things because they're religious. Well, let's take the most recent pressing case. Richard Dawkins and I and a few others, in the response to the Haiti earthquake, set up an emergency charity for people of non-belief to give to, because so many charitable organizations are, in fact, proselytizing groups. So we raised about $2 million in a weekend. And all that money goes straight. By the way, thank you. If you go to Richard's website, you can find out more about how to donate to this, because it's permanent. It's going to stay in being. All that money went straight to Doctors Without Borders, of course, and the International Red Cross, which, though it has a cross, isn't a religious organization. Both these organizations are already in Haiti. They're proven. None of the money goes to support any missionary activity. None. And the Scientologists and all the others who turned up in Haiti, and the people who turned up in Haiti to kidnap babies to convert them to their faith, and the Catholics who turned up and said, standing in the ruins of their own cathedral, with 250,000 Haitians buried under the rubble, said, God spoke here today, and you should listen to his message. Don't tell me that's good. Don't tell me that's good. That's wicked. It's proselytizing. It's proselytizing with the helpless, using them as objects of charity and conversion. It's lying to people.
But there's also a lot of
wrong to lie.
Why is the leader of Egypt's huge Christian minority suddenly compelled to make a TV appearance? Because one of his bishops had said in an interview that he thought that some of the verses of the Quran showed signs of having been added later on and to have been later accretion. And Pope Shenouda was forced onto the television to say, it's not that that didn't happen, it's it couldn't have happened. It shouldn't even be discussed. So that it has to be claimed even by non-Muslim subjects of a Muslim state that there is, after all, because no Christian claims this about the Bible anymore, no Jew claims it about the Pentateuch. After all, yes, there is just one book that's completely word and letter perfect from the first time it was not even written down, but recited. Now, demands that you believe the impossible do not lead to peaceful outcomes. Nor do they lead to peaceful or tolerant regimes. And I'm not going to ask you which Muslim country you would like to live in. I don't know whether Professor Ramana will tell us which one he would pick if he had to, because I don't have to ask you a question like that, because it's already in your mind.
I mean, I think it's very good to know that we're born into a losing struggle. I think that the stoicism that comes from that and the reflection that comes from that is very useful. I'm not very impressed by people who say, well, I wish it wasn't true, so I'll try and act as if it isn't. It is true. Everything is governed by entropy and decline and annihilation and disaster. And you're born into a losing struggle, and because you're a mammal primate mammal, you know you are, and you know you're going to die, and that there'll be a lot of struggle and pain on the way. I don't want a world without anxiety and grief and pain and struggle. I can't get it.
No one's saying you can't have that.
But those who offer it to me, I spurn the gift. I don't want what you want. I don't want the feeling of eternal love and peace. Love and peace, very, very overrated in my view. One of the many reasons, actually, I should despise all religions equally, but and I do in a way. But one way in which I prefer Judaism to its rivals is that the emphasis is more on justice than on love.
I want to go to the rabbi. Why is that not misanthropic of you, that attitude?
Misanthropic doesn't mean I have to hate people.
Well, it means I
respect.
Hard.
It means I respect them enough. It means I respect them enough not to offer them false consolation.
I do think it's important.
The realm of illusion will not help you to cure this condition.
Now, you're right. I was surprised to find myself saying, Professor, when you say that the problem is not the book, but the reader. In the case of the Quran, that is certainly true of me. It's true probably of every book I've ever read, that there are difficulties I have with it or capacities I don't have with which to approach it or understand it. But if I'm reading the Quran, I certainly say, well, I can't tell whether this book is the Word of God or not. I can only doubt that there is such a thing. But I can hope that this was a bad day for God. Can't I? And I can hope to live in a country where I can say that and get applause. Yes, and even mirth. And don't think that it isn't a precious thing, and don't think it's being compromised. I'm coming to that. I don't like the idea of a paradise reward for martyrs. Don't like it. It's not me somehow. Don't like the account. Don't like the early accounts of village squabbles with the local Jews who've taken a look at the new claimant to be the Messiah and decided about him what they decided about the previous claimant. He's no good. He's not up to snuff. Do you think the Jews are ever going to be forgiven for that, by the way? For rejecting 2 in a row? I don't think so. And I don't see why they should hope for forgiveness either. And still I'm allowed to stand here and say this, and there are many parts of Europe I couldn't do that anymore, or I'd have to be very careful in who I'd invited for the audience. I couldn't do it easily on the air, couldn't do it easily in print, couldn't do it easily in public, couldn't do it on certain campuses, couldn't do it with certain publishing houses. Now, all of this has been done to us by the wrong Muslims. Well, let's get together then, isolate who these wrong Muslims are, who've imposed a culture of violence-backed censorship upon us, and let's get rid of them and have an honest discussion about the text and the reader. And I think the ball is in your court, Professor, on that. Just to stay with my own profession, the thing I know best. Not one major media outlet, print or broadcast, has yet shown you what the Danish cartoons actually look like. Yale University Press, which commissioned a book on them which was to include the cartoons, as how could it not, eventually panicked. Yale University Press panicked and published the book without the cartoons over the objections of its author. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. The President of the United States and the head of the Joint Chiefs a few days ago were so pulverized with fear that they had to address personally in pleading tones a Christian nutbag in Florida who might have been or might not have been about to commit a minor act of blasphemy. Is this the culture that Islam wants us to have in relation to it? One of, if you like, preemptive submission, preemptive cowering, backed by the fear of force? Because that is not multiculturalism. That's nothing like the gorgeous mosaic. That's actually the absolute negation of what a multicultural system would be like. And a multicultural system has to look rather askance, I think, on a religion whose preachers and websites openly make threats against people like myself, against the Jewish people, against the Hindus, who, for heaven's sake, aren't even monotheists, can be killed on almost any pretext, against, and a very important point, and I have to make it, and against the wrong kind of Muslim. Now, Professor, don't, I'll say this as mildly as I can, don't, you may not be aware that you were, and I'm certainly, I don't want to increase the area of unexpected offense-taking that's been so hugely broadened by the sensitivities of a religion that has the answer to everything. But I'll just say I don't greatly care to be told, as if I didn't know, that an Iraqi life is as precious as an American one.
Well, if you'll pardon me, I won't share any of my griefs with you. But I've never had one, or known anyone who had one, who's had the faintest consolation from religion. And indeed, being told, as the Christians tell them, that they're off to a better place and so on, I think is positively wicked thing to do. I think lying to the dying for a living, what self-respecting person can do that?
And you know it's a lie because, just tell me how you know it's a lie, since you assert it again and again.
Because the person saying it cannot possibly know it to be true.
And therefore it's a lie.
They don't have access to information.
Even if they believe it, it's a lie.
Yes, it's a lie.
But how do we create, for those who aren't able or don't desire to walk around in despair or to walk around in irony, in a world that can bring plenty of despair? Try it, fine. But I think it's manifestly clear lots of people don't choose that. So what does atheism offer?
Well, it offers the chance of living without illusion, which I think it says that philosophy and literature will do a great deal more for you. There's a lot more morality in them. There's a lot more ethical discussion in Dostoevsky, say.
It may be true, but who will present them in our society, in a real society? Who will present them in a way to create structure?
For now, I'm presenting.
There he is.
For now, I'm presenting. I can't do...
You're going to be very busy.
I can only appear in my own person here. I can even say that to some extent it works for me. This irony, I think, is tremendously useful. as his philosophy, especially the philosophy of Spinoza, especially in times of anguish. And the realization that there's no false consolation can actually cheer you up. Once you face the fact that you're born into a losing struggle, things immediately appear a great deal more manageable in some ways. And really, of the remarks against this made, not one of these remarks couldn't have been made by a devout member of the Muslim Brotherhood. And what I want to ask him is this: if anything of what he says is true, is he really saying that he would prefer me not to be myself, not to be an unbeliever, and someone who believes in irony and of the unillusioned world, but I'd be morally better off if I was a Wahhabi Muslim, for example.
Is me asking,
or a Roman Catholic.
Is he me?
Are you asking?
Okay.
I mean, according to you, I would be a better person.
No, don't answer the question. You asked me the question.
Right.
You're not allowed to answer it for me.
You imply.
I imply.
But I want to know if you really mean.
And I want to know, I repeat my question, who has the authority to issue fatwas? Is it Sheikh Qaradawi, who you sometimes very much expressed respect for, who on Al Jazeera gives advice on all kinds of things, some of them innocuous, sexual matters and so forth, doctrinal rulings, sometimes upon the legitimacy or otherwise of suicide bombing, if directed at Israelis, not just Jews, of course, but no, we draw the distinction. On the other hand, Hamas, which does the suicide bombing, doesn't draw the distinction. If I can't issue a fatwa against Hamas, if I'm a Muslim, if there's no one who will and they won't, surely someone could say, we don't think Hamas should have on its website and manifesto the reproduction of the protocols of the elders of Zion, a Christian fascist fabrication that is one of the warrants for the Nazi exterminationist solution. I mean, surely that's a question for the UN Anti-Racism Committee on a spare day. Or since that spare day never seems to come, for some Muslim authority to say, no, brothers, don't do that. It doesn't come. It doesn't happen. Look on the website, it's still there. Now, you would do better, I think, Professor, if you identified yourself as a member of a very small and critical and endangered minority. Someone who really is against all this and will say so, and will also decry the fact that the religion itself can't seem to throw it off. But you seem to have that a little bit both ways. Now,
I'm going to have to
very well.
Stop you so we can get to
Yes, so then my closing statement is this. If you want diversity, as much as the professor does, as much as I'm sure many people here do, religious diversity, cultural diversity, what you need for it is this. You need a secular state with a godless constitution like this one. To speak as you did of the Ottoman Empire as a place where there were not just Muslims, but Christians and Jews, is either not to know yourself or to expect others to have forgotten or not to know what it meant to be a non-Muslim under the Caliphate or under any similar theocratic Muslim authority to this day. No, what we need, secularism is the only guarantee of religious freedom, and yours and that of every other Muslim we will defend. But you won't be surprised that we have some questions for you in the meanwhile. Thank you.
May I ask, Christopher Hitchens, you've debated Rabbi David Wolpe on this subject. You've debated the Reverend Al Sharpton.
Yes.
What's the difference between these debates?
Well, the Reverend Al Sharpton is another case of the damage done to society by religion, because once it was agreed by the rest of America that black people are best led by preachers, and once it was agreed to write out of the civil rights record the heroic black secularists like Bayard Rustin and the great black union leader Philip Randolph, who actually organized with the help of the United Automobile Workers the March on Washington. Once all that had been forgotten, and we decide, yeah, black people, they really love their preachers, then once Dr. King has gone, it's one succession of junk demagogues after another, all of them given the mantle because they're in holy orders. There's no fraudulence you can't get away with in this country if you can get the word reverend put in front of your name.
Questions from
Sharpton's a very conspicuous example of that.
Well, I'm certainly not going to criticize Islam for not having a pope. And in fact, it would be your vis-a-vis in this discussion was horribly in error in any case, in that Christianity never had only one pope, and still doesn't. I mean, there were several Catholic claimants to the papacy at different times, just among Roman Catholics. But today, I mentioned one of them, the Pope of the Coptic Christians based in Cairo. The Eastern Orthodox don't call their leader the Pope, they call him the Patriarch, but the Christian world is full of Pope types, usually anathematizing one another. The Pope is just the word that innocent Americans use for the man who claims to be the leader of the Roman Catholics. So I don't think it's possible, in fact, to have a moral authority within religion, because I think the two things are so sharply divorced. But this doesn't lead to just chaos, because, and it certainly doesn't lead to the dictatorship of minorities or extremists. I'll give you two examples quickly. In the case of the moral blackmail of Denmark that was backed up by a physical threat to destroy its economy and burn out its embassies across the world, well-coordinated attack of sabotage against a small European democracy. The organizing group was a thing called the OIC, the Organization of the Islamic Congress. Groups all the Muslim countries in the world. It's an increasingly powerful lobby at the United Nations, hopes to pass an international resolution forbidding all criticism of religion, all forms of blasphemy and profanity. Every ambassador of those countries in Copenhagen went to Mr. Rasmussen, the Prime Minister of Denmark, and told him, under the threat of violence, he should change his law so as to allow him to determine what went into the Danish newspapers. And when he said he couldn't do that, things got a lot worse. Now, that's the ambassador of Egypt, and the ambassador of Turkey, and the ambassador of Algeria, important countries, in the case of Egypt, containing an enormous Christian population, coming to you as if they spoke for a religion. Either this claim is true or it is not. It's self-evidently not true, but it is certainly made. Let's be in any doubt about it. And let's have any doubt that it means to extend its influence over the people who are sitting in this hall. Second, very quick, the fatwa against Salman Rushdie, in other words, the offer of money to suborn murder for the crime of writing a work of fiction in his own name by the spiritual leader of Shia Islam, that's what the fatwa meant then, means now, was, after the murder of many people, associated or not with the publication of the book, repudiated ostensibly by the Iranian government after long pressure and lobbying at the United Nations, about 10 years ago, I think that was. But I've been since then, I've had the pleasure of going to Friday prayers at Tehran University, twice, to hear the sermon. And on both occasions, there were banners and slogans saying that the Imam's holy sentence against Salman Rushdie will never die. It hasn't died with the Imam. Khomeini's death warrant will always be carried out. Not, I think, a very good use of the premises of a university. I can't speak for whether it's a good occasion for Friday prayers or not. Well, it brings me to a second point. You see, there's something shady involved here. Some people say that Islam and Islamists give themselves permission to lie to non-believers. It sounds like the sort of vulgar, paranoid thing that an Islamophobe would go around saying, doesn't it? It's very easy to disprove, except that it hasn't been, as that example will just illustrate. And these are not minor threats. These are threats to the very core of what we believe is the essential thing for a society, which is the ability to ask questions, to read the books we choose, to pursue unfettered investigations. And these are flatly negated by the claims of a religion that says it is the answer to everything.
I can't paraphrase him properly, but you really ought to get hold of, it's easy to find on Google, a lecture given by Lawrence Krauss, who I regard as the greatest living physicist. And it's about the quantum, and it's about a whole universe from nothing. It's exactly how you get from nothing to something, in fact, quite a lot of things. One means by which this happens is the following. Every second that we're speaking, a star the size of our sun or bigger goes out, blows up or goes out. That's been the case every single second since the first moment of the Big Bang. It's a lot. But that'll be a lot of suns going out as we speak. And there's a lot of annihilation, isn't it? There's a lot of destruction. It's on a rather what you might call almost a wasteful scale. It does have the positive outcome, though, that we are all constituted of those materials. We are made of stardust. Now, I find that a rather more majestic and wonderful and even beautiful idea than, say, the idea of the burning bush. A bit more impressive. Gives you more to think about.
Are they mutually exclusive? Are they mutually exclusive? Did God make you of stardust?
One has the virtue of being true and provable and studyable, which the other doesn't. And I do think that the verifiability of something is a virtue of
Are we simply material then?
Yes. We don't have bodies. We are bodies. Until 50,000 years ago, there were 4 other kinds of biped, humanoid, not unlike us, still living on the planet, died leaving no descendants. We're the only survivors of those people. That family were the last. We don't know if they had gods or not.
So you think the inexplicable...
No religion ever invented appears to have known that these creatures even existed, because the religious are forced to believe that the only really significant event that happened in the human story happened about 3,000 years ago.
The mysteries, the inexplicable, are we just waiting?
That's not true.
No,
that's factually not true.
All of this massive Big Bang cosmological churning and destruction and annihilation, which is paralleled, by the way, on our own Earth, where 99% of all species that have ever been on the planet have already gone extinct, leaving no descendants. All of this could be part of a plan. There is no way an atheist can prove it's not. But it's some plan, isn't it, with mass destruction, pitiless extermination, annihilation going on all the time, and all of this set in motion on a scale that's absolutely beyond our imagination, in order that the Pope can tell people not to jerk off.
Stupid. Right.
When I say the American Constitution is godless, I mean, I was quoting the title of a famous study of it by Professor Israel Kramnik. What I mean by that is to say, the US Constitution only mentions religion and God in its preambles when it means to say the ways in which they must be kept out of the public square. That happens to be a fact about our Constitution and the reason why we still have it. Otherwise, the Republic would have been destroyed long before. And that its First Amendment says that religion can be no business of the government, a statement no Muslim society could begin to make. Thank you.
All religions are wrong in the same way, in that they privilege faith over reason, but they're not all equally bad in the same way all the time. I mean, if I'd been writing in the 1930s, I would certainly have said that the Roman Catholic Church was the most dangerous religion in the world because of its open alliance with fascism and anti-Semitism, which the damage from that our culture has never recovered from and never will. But at the moment, it's very clear to me that the most toxic form that religion takes is the Islamic form. The horrible idea of wanting to end up with Sharia, with a religion-governed state, a state of religious law, and that the best means of getting there is jihad, holy war, and that Muslims have a special right to feel aggrieved enough to demand this, I think is an absolute obscene wickedness, and I think their religion is nonsense. And
in its
entirety. The idea of God speaks to some illiterate merchant warlord in Arabia, and he's able to write this down perfectly, and it contains the answers to all human. Don't waste my time. It's bullshit.
But you're.
I was very struck because this is the core question, so we might as well revisit it. I was very struck this week reading. I'm sure you saw it. The Pope's brother, Monsignor Georg Ratzinger, who runs the choir school in Regensburg. Yes. He's discovered recently there's been some unpleasantness at this school, of which he was the steward for about 20, 30 years. He said he didn't know about any of that, and surely claims not to have taken any part in it, but he said he did used to smack the boys around quite a lot. He said, until Bavarian law changed and made it illegal for teachers to hit children. Right. So, well, I don't want to be told anymore that without religious people we wouldn't know what morality was. He didn't know this until the secular law intervened and taught him how to behave. Now, wait. What is the church, what is the whole racket of the church in this? Protecting itself from it, saying, they were all ordered, don't go near the courts, don't go near the police, we'll sort this out among ourselves. And they say they're the people who prevent us from succumbing to moral relativism. I'm not hearing it from them. I'm sorry, it's insulting to be talked to in that way. The great recent governor of this state, Mr. Romney, wants to be president. Okay, there's a constitutional issue here. Mormons are supposed to say that their prophet, as they call their leader, his word is sovereign over anyone else's, including the Constitution of the United States. So Romney has to say, and finally people did force him to answer the question, well, do you think that about your prophet? He said, no, the Constitution takes precedence in all cases. Fine. So to the extent that he's an acceptable person, it's to the extent he's not a Mormon. The discipline of secularism is necessary to civilize these superstitions.
Well, Sharia just means law. I mean, all people who say Sharia law are making an elementary mistake, and of course it's not the case that every thief has their hand lopped off in Muslim society, or every adulterer gets stoned. And, so, and I'm perfectly sure that's not just because it would diminish the labor force so radically, or so to speak, disable it. I think it's more because of something I've claimed to notice elsewhere, which is that religion is man-made. And so there are enormous discrepancies in how these things are promulgated and also how they are enforced. And most countries and societies come quite early and easily to the conclusion that their own religions are, in one form or another, not really practicable. After all, in Saudi Arabia, a woman can't even drive a car, whereas in Iran she can vote, not for much, but she can, as much as a man can, let's say. Her vote can be stolen and degraded as much as her husband's or her brother. There's an infinite variation. I don't know. I can't shake what I saw once on the BBC from someone whose career in London I followed. I don't know if you know him. You wouldn't like him. A guy called Anjum Chowdhury. He's a very well-known noisemaker around London, complaining about secularism, Judaism, all this kind of thing. And he'd been in trouble with the law a few times, and was interviewed on the BBC, went on about how nothing would change until the green flag of Islam was flying over Downing Street and Buckingham Palace and so forth. And was asked, I thought quite mildly by the BBC interviewer, he said, well, if this is the way you feel about Sharia and about total Islamic rule, wouldn't you feel happier moving to a country where they already had it? And which is, a polite question, but a rather cheap one. But still, what didn't prepare me for the answer? Chowdhury looked straight at the guy and straight into camera and said, what makes you think this is your country? I thought it was a very good question. Now, why do you feel, I think I know partly why you feel, why do you feel it's necessary to affirm that? And of course a Muslim should learn the language, should obey the laws, should observe the customs and so on. Most immigrants don't feel they, so to speak, absolutely have to say that. The answer, I suspect, is that it's embarrassing to notice that in places like as far apart as Sweden and as Spain, there are groups of people who say their countries should be part of the caliphate and that that's why they've come here. And if it wasn't for those people, you wouldn't be in this position. So it seems to me that in order to be consistent, you should fear them and dislike them, find them morally and intellectually repulsive, at least as much as, if not more, than I do. And I don't say that you don't, but I do think that is the urgent priority. On the lady's question about where would be the best country to live if you were a Muslim and wanting to be a member of a sexual or gender minority, or I think she said a female or a homosexual. So hard to confuse. Actually, the easiest place for you to live in that case would probably be, I was thinking about it while Professor Ramadan was talking, would probably be, this will be my closing statement, would almost certainly be either Bosnia-Herzegovina or Kosovo. Culturally Muslim, democratic, open societies in southern and Balkan Europe that were saved from obliteration by the power of the United States, which has never had a word of thanks for what it did in that matter. and which remains a secular country with a godless constitution.
That's a note on which we can end.
Which is the last best hope of humanity. Thank you.
All right.